Joining me on the program right now is a high-performance sports nutrition coach expert who has worked with the likes of UFC heavyweight champion Stipe Miocic. Dr. Paul Biondich joins me here on the program. Paul, how are you?
I'm awesome, James. Thanks for having me on this show. Really excited about it.
Yeah, I'm excited as well. And for our audience at home who don't know, Paul and I have known each other for a couple of years now. Paul was actually a guest on an old fitness podcast I used to do called Fit for Radio. So it's great to have Paul on here and talk sort of more about MMA and obviously his work with Stipe. But for those who might not be familiar with you, Paul, what's sort of your background and your experience in the health and fitness industry?
Well, been around in the industry a long time. In UFC or combat sports specifically, I've been involved 15 years in UFC working with fighters. The very first fight I actually worked professionally was UFC 34, so it's dating me back a little bit, but that was with welterweight champion Carlos Newton. And since then I've been worked with a lot of different UFC fighters and got to travel to Japan to some Pride fights. It's been a lot of fun. I mean, I've worked with athletes in the NHL, Major League Baseball, tons of athletes from the Canadian national team from various sports because I am Canadian, so I work with some of those athletes. So it's been a really fun ride and a great experience.
And what separates you, Paul, from a lot of the other people in the MMA sphere, your George Lockhart's, your Mike Dolce's, guys like that, is that you're actually a sports nutrition supplement expert. Now, what that means is you know all the supplements out there. You've done your research. You come at it from a scientific point of view. You're not one of these fighters who just decides to call himself a nutritionist. When an athlete comes to you and says something like, I don't need supplements, I get all my nutrition with food, what do you sort of say to that?
Food is the foundation. I mean, you have to have an amazing, foundation to base your sports performance off of. But, in today's world, especially for athletes, for somebody who's going to get from food, that's a romantic concept. It's just not possible. I mean, that are training and competing at such a high level that very specific micronutrients are getting burned at a rate that it's just not possible to replace with food. And that's where, supplementation comes into play. In addition to that, I mean, even if you ate a perfectly organic diet, our organic food today is not as 20 years ago or 40 years ago or 60 years ago. I mean, our soils have been over-farmed. We have a loss of a lot of micronutrients and minerals. So supplementation is absolutely 100% critical for an athlete to get to the next level. The real issue or problem with supplements is, I would say that 95% of supplementation I wouldn't feed to my cat, and I mean it's that bad, So and I know because I study globally. I mean, I look at nutrition companies in Canada, United States, Australia, New Zealand, the UK, Germany. I mean, my athletes want the best in the world, so I check the world for the best quality products. So from a quality perspective, it's very difficult to get, source real ingredients. That's number one. Number two is, can we trust the label? So many times we hear, companies are getting nailed because, they're claiming something in a label and it's not there. And number three, a little scary, fact. It's an old fact, but I mean, in 2001, they tested in the United States. They tested a group of supplements from kind of energy, libido, muscle mass building, fat loss, like this category, and almost 1 in 5 supplements had in them. So it's a really scary point for a professional athlete, whether UFC or NHL or Major League Soccer, whoever, NCAA. Very important that you're the person recommending supplements to you or the ones you're buying don't contain these banned substances, and that's where we fall into Inform for Sport or NSF, the organizations that that kind of fall into this. So it's a critical concern.
I know in the past when I've spoken with you, you talk a lot about nutrition timing, I should say. For our audience at home here, what is that and how does it sort of help the athlete?
Timing is massive. For any athlete who really wants to maximize their performance, recovery, repair, or growth, it's critical. So in other words, before an athlete starts to participate in training or there are certain nutrients that the body requires to charge up or to be primed. So that's a very specific subset of ingredients. And then during training, we have to look at, what is the athlete doing? What are their physical demands? And what is the energy requirements during that specific event. And we need to make sure that the athlete is getting those specific ingredients during that time. And then, of course, we've got post-workout. I think, James, the biggest error I see is, especially in UFC fighters, they train really, really hard, very hard, but they don't match their training, their nutrition to recover. It's a huge void. And so you got an amazing trainers, amazing strength conditioning coaches. The fighters are working their butts off, and they're feeling tired, lethargic, sore, and they're not getting the benefit. They're not getting the repair, recovery, and growth simply just through they're not knowing. They're not matching their nutritional needs. So nutrient timing is so important because we can add certain ingredients, foods, supplements that the body wants at certain times to optimize recovery, repair, and growth. And that's where supplements really can come in and enhance this. I had a fighter come up to me and say, Paul, what's the best protein, that you could recommend? And so I gave him a recommendation, and he said, is the best protein bar in the world? And I didn't know the answer. Actually, because, sometimes I become like an obsessive compulsive squirrel digging until I find the answer. And to the point, it drove me to put 500 protein bars into my computer. I searched the world's protein bar supply to say, what is the best protein bar in the world? And so, when I discovered that answer, I can tell my fighters or athletes what that is, not from an opinion perspective, but from a factual perspective. And then you look into, the world of protein powders or supplements, it's crazy. I mean, you look at soy-based proteins and vegan, chia, pea, hemp, rice proteins. We go into milk proteins, which just breaks then into whey proteins and caseins. And protein has sub-fractions of whey protein isolate, whey protein concentrate, whey protein hydrolase. And if it doesn't get more confusing to that, it's sourcing, grain-fed, cows versus grass-fed, and then processing. Is the milk being extracted from high heat or cold filtration? So when you manage all of this and figure out, okay, are these all the same? What are they different about them? Where to use them? And how does an athlete benefit specifically from each type of proteins at each particular time? So it's a massive world, massive confusion, and I've spent a lot of time sorting this out, to get to the truth.
Let's talk about Stipe Miocic. Obviously, one of your best clients, one of your biggest clients. How did you start working with him? And when you first started working with him, what was sort of the team's, what did they want you to sort of address when you started working with him?
James, I was totally shocked. I'll have to be honest with you. I've never had this happen to me. I came down to Cleveland, Strong Style, and I met with Marcus Marinelli, the best MMA coach in the world, Greg Kalikas, the manager, and Stipe. And I looked at Stipe, and he's 6'4", 240 pounds, and to be honest with you, that's not that heavy, for a 6'4" frame, 240. I mean, I said to Marcus, Marcus, do you want me to put a program together to put maybe 10 pounds more on him, 10 pounds lean muscle to 250? And Marcus said, absolutely not. Stipe has freaky strength. He's a very strong guy. They don't have an issue with strength with Stipe, not at all. What they want to do, and this is Marcus said, you know what? He's a heavyweight. We want to optimize his nutrition, supplements, etc., for endurance. And that was brilliant because I never really thought of it that way. And so, if you look at, I've been working with Stipe's camp in Strong Style for 4 years now. You look in his fights as a heavyweight, okay? He went 3 rounds with Roy Nelson, was very crisp in that fight. I mean, he could have went another 2 without an issue. He went through a 5-round war with Junior Dos Santos. I mean, it was arguably a split decision win, but it was a loss that doesn't matter. Point performed fantastic. And then he set the UFC world record for most punches landed in a fight, in a 5-round fight against Mark Hunt. I mean, and this is a heavyweight. This is not a lightweight, landing all these punches. So, and he really did that from, three concepts is, the brains and brilliance of Marcus Marinelli to realize that a heavyweight would be focusing on endurance. Number 2, his strength conditioning coach, Bob Khalil, who's incredible. He does stuff that I've never seen before. I don't even understand what he does, but he's brilliant. And then 3, the nutritional support, to support that, aerobic and anaerobic systems allow him to perform at that level.
Great. How long have you been working with Stipe? When did you first start working with him? Which fight was it?
It was 4 years ago. It was the Stefan Struve fight, I think. It was the first one, and it was a loss. So it didn't start well for me, but
I was going to say not off to a great start, so to speak, but that's interesting. How open was Stipe to some of the changes that you were recommending to him? Because we know sometimes athletes can be a little hard-headed.
Well, his short answer was whatever you say, coach, which is incredible as an athlete, but the stuff that we suggested off the top was, listen, we all have routines and habits that we get into that we love, we enjoy, and when you find that some stuff that you enjoy consuming is not going to help your performance, it's a tough one because it's like you got to go right, and so change is always hard, but I mean, he didn't blink an eye, and he went right on to what he needed to do, and he did. He's never questioned anything that the team has ever suggested for him. So he's a special athlete.
And what is it like working with Team Strong Style? I think they're one of the most underrated camps out there. You just sort of talked about them a bit there too. I imagine the relationship's pretty good.
Marcus Marinelli at Strong Style. I mean, in my opinion, he is the coach in the world in MMA. You've got actually a very rated team. You've got, Pablo Castro, his jiu-jitsu coach, is a multiple world champion in jiu-jitsu. And I mean, he doesn't get a lot of street cred. I mean, his boxing coaches, Joel Delgado, Alex Cooper, are absolutely phenomenal. You've got, Jessica I, obviously, UFC fighter, she trains there. You've got Victor Ventresca, who's also a world champion in jiu-jitsu, and Steve Kines, who's just a brilliant strategy and strategist and training partner. And you put this team together, and it's a very family-like atmosphere. I've never been in a team like this, and I'm very grateful and actually thankful to be part of this team. It's a special place to be. I'll tell you, if I was a UFC fighter looking for a home, man, I'd be calling this in a heartbeat.
Awesome. What would you say is sort of the biggest difference between when you first started working with Stipe to where he is now as the heavyweight champion, as far as him and his performance?
I think this might sound like a cliche, but I mean, his drive to become better keeps increasing. It's very strange because whether it's a loss or a tough fight or whatever, his drive to become better and learn is off the charts. I mean, you've got athletes that can train, but are they coached? Can they learn new things? And Stipe is a very interesting fighter where he can continually learn new tasks. It's very rare. It's easy to say it. I've been in the UFC game for 15 years. I've seen a lot of stuff. I've seen a lot of fighters come and go. And there's really no limit to what this guy can do. I mean, there's a very good chance he's going to be the world champion for a very long time.
What about challenges? You obviously, I imagine distance is probably one of them. You live in Toronto. Stipe lives in Cleveland. I know sometimes when you guys travel, because you do travel with him for all of his fights, sometimes the nutrition options aren't as readily available as, say, in some other places. What are sort of some of the stumbling blocks that you've had to overcome?
Well, the thing with supplementation is they're portable. You can put them in your suitcase and you can travel with them. So when, we bring a base, supplement line with us. I mean, we just got back from Brazil, obviously, where he won against Verdun. And Brazil was a phenomenal place to be at for food because, Brazil has one of the most incredible, grass-fed steaks, beef, chicken. I mean, all their food is really actually premium. It's actually, I hate to say it, it's probably quality than what we have in North America. And the preparation for Brazilian food. So on the food side of things, wow, Brazil is a spectacular place to eat. I'll tell you that much. So no issues there.
Great. Now, you mentioned Brazil. You mentioned being there when Stipe won the title. Was that sort of the proudest moment of your professional career, seeing him get the title like that?
100%. Proudest moment of my career. I'm sure everybody's same thing with Strong Style. I've been professionally, I've worked in 3 world championship fights, and this is the first one I've won, or been part of the team that's won. So you'll never forget it. It's an incredible moment, and I'm really grateful to be part of Strong Style.
How'd you celebrate after the fight?
Went back to the hotel room and just had a few cocktails. A couple UFC brass came by, and sun was coming up, so we enjoyed every minute.
I understand. Fair enough. UFC 203 is coming up in Cleveland. Stipe is going to defend the title at home. He's taking on Alistair Overeem, and I know you and I have talked a bunch in the past, sort of off the record. This is a fight that I know Stipe has wanted for a while. What are your thoughts on the matchup? Not, I know you're not an analyst, but I imagine you must be pretty happy that he's fighting a guy he's wanted to fight for so long.
Yes, and everybody in the heavyweight division is dangerous. As the cliche goes, it's a punch away. So, I mean, you can't take anybody for granted, and Stipe is not going to. Stipe knows that every fight he has to get better, train harder, be in better condition, better shape, and it's going to be no different for this fight. I mean, he's enjoyed his victories in Cleveland. Cleveland has been celebrating hard, but when it's time for him to get back to work, he's focused, so he'll be ready for this fight.
All right, I got to ask one more question before I let you go here, Paul. And again, I appreciate the time here. What is sort of your ideal client or athlete that you'd like to work with that maybe you haven't had a chance to work with yet?
Great question. I mean, really, any professional athlete is fantastic to work with. I mean, especially people think that if I come in, I'm going to replace the current nutritionist or something. No, what I love to do is it's more like a Ferrari mechanic. You're coming in to a built machine and you're analyzing the program and just say, hey, listen, here's how we're going to optimize this. Here's how we're going to make recovery a little bit better. Here's the supplementation we're going to put in. Here's the nutrient timing stuff that we're going to change and improve. So it's a lot of fine tuning, and I love the fine tuning because the details matter at this professional level. It's the 1, 2, 3, 5% changes that you can make on athletes. It's really fun, and you can really see it. The athletes feel it. I'm in a results business. I'm in a results business. I'm here to make changes, results in an athlete, and if I can do that, then it's fantastic. But I think the one growing market, or not necessarily market, but deficiency is in the kids market. The young adults, because kids now are training like crazy. They're training as hard as professionals, but their nutrition is awful. So, and it's not necessarily we're doing a lot of supplements with them, but it's basic food concepts and just basic nutrition strategies. Small changes, can create big results. So, whether it's consulting for an existing pro team or working with individual athletes, I mean, I just enjoy what I do, and it's a lot of fun.
Well, Paul, I really appreciate you joining me here on the program. A lot of information here, really, really knowledgeable. I always learn something when I talk to you. I'm sure my audience feels the same way. Where can they get a hold of you on the social media universe, and anything you got coming up, feel free to plug it right here on the program.
Probably the best thing is on Twitter, at Paul T. Biondich, Biondich. And you can always message me on Facebook as well. I'm in the process of revamping or creating a new website, so that'll be up soon, but Twitter is probably the easiest.